Hey there. So we want to go from that image toward this sort of look and feel color-wise. Um, just to call your attention to the histogram panel. If you look at the histograms at both of these, they're very shallow in the darks. The blacks are really lifted up. And then compared to this image, the histogram is very heavy in these darker quarter tones. So some initial color correction is usually needed, and you want to bring your images toward like a base, kind of neutral, not necessarily pleasing color, but an nice even histogram. So you might approach this with the raw file, and I'll kind of demonstrate some of that, the way you might do that with a raw file. I'll just dupe that background layer, make it a smart object, and then go to filter, camera raw filter. And this gives you some options. It does some really nice color adjustment that's maybe not so available with just adjustment layers. But this is how you might process the raw just to balance things out. Just from the get-go, let me zero this back out to 0. You can see in this histogram, there's some, it's really bunched up here and it's clipping a little bit even in the blacks. So let's see if we can address that and get a smooth tonal range to work with across the blacks. So I might bring the exposure up just to push everything in the histogram a little bit to the right. Don't want to go too far and start clipping the whites, but maybe something like that starts to help. Now if we bring the highlights down, that gives us a little bit more room to push the shadows up. We're starting to get a little bit more detail in those shadows, which I think is going to help make this a more interesting image, with a little bit more definition there in the shadows. Now looking at it, I can see that it's a little yellow overall, so I might just kind of bring the temperature back, bring some blues in. And let's see what else. It's pretty saturated, and that's, I think, what's causing some of this clipping. So maybe we just bring the whole saturation down overall. See how that starts to rein in some of those clipped values? Dehaze is a pretty fun slider. It can help kind of add some haze to it. But in this instance, that might be kind of nice to help kind of smooth out that contrast. You can kind of recover some of that with the clarity. That gives you a little bit local contrast. Okay, well that's not too bad. You can maybe bring the blacks up a little bit here too. I might go into the curve, and in point, you can drag the curve up to have a look at the blacks and see what's going on here. You can see they're still pretty saturated in like the green yellow area, and most of that is going to be like specular highlight from the sun reflection on the tomatoes. I might just do a correction here. And the idea here is just to give myself a histogram that's not clipping either in the shadows or in the highlights. Yeah, let's go into the hue and saturation and see if we can smooth out this blue channel that's probably being caused by a little bit too much saturation in the greens. So let's try the green and bring the saturation down. See how that kind of brings that in a little bit. Yellows, That's not doing much. I think maybe something like that is, it's going to give you a little bit more dynamic range to really work with. And it might make for a more interesting image once we try and take it toward that risograph look that you're going for. So this is by no means a pleasing looking image, but it's a little bit more balanced, and it has more of a more dynamic range. Okay, let's just click OK here. I'll show you another adjustment I like to do on smart objects. If ever you don't like this adjustment, the nice thing about working with a smart object, double click that camera raw filter and you can go back in. Okay? But another one I like for really contrasty images is go to Image Adjustments and Shadow Highlights. And you can bring these down from the default, but this was going to give you a little bit more shadow detail as well, and you can really bring back some lost detail with this adjustment. So before and after, that just gives us a little bit more to work with in the shadows. So you can already see in our histogram we're getting a little bit more range there. It is tricky to try and do a one-size-fits-all adjustment to get all images from here to here, because each image has a different tone map and distribution of lights and darks. Both of these look like they're taken on a bright day. They're middle to high key images. So that's something to keep in mind, is if you were to take your base image and apply something to make it look like this, it just wouldn't have that same look and feel, because this image, I would say, is it's warm and inviting overall because of the yellow, but it's also really moody and heavily distributed toward the darks. So maybe starting with something like this that's more quote-unquote balanced. Everybody's going to have their own opinion here. But those are some techniques I use that give you a more dynamic range. Now what I might do is do like another kind of color balance. And I'll show you the use of curves. It's a little bit difficult working with curves in the camera raw because you don't get a preview in the document. But typical like color correction with curves is you want to balance the black point and the white point. So to do that, I usually just drag this curve all the way to the left until I find the darkest point of the image. And in this one, it looks like it's right up here. So let's zoom in there. You can see some evidence of some of that clipping. Let's go to our info palette. And I'm going to hit I on the keyboard to get the eyedropper. So that's a 2, 2, 2, 2. Usually in like print, I set my black point to 12, 12, 12. So if you set your points here to 12, 12, 12, double clicking here, bring up this palette, 12, 12, 12, click OK. It'll ask you to save as defaults, and you can say yes. You can click on that blackest point of the image, and it'll set the those points to 12, 12, 12. So it's got a little bit more room before it goes to black. And we'll do the similar thing with the whites. Here, I'll zoom out. Here, you're mostly in specular highlights, so those can have like a prismatic effect from the sun. It's not always great to trust them, but let's just rein these in. That's 255. I don't know. But you can set it to be more along the lines of 247. I'm not really going to trust this. I might kind of look at and see that the surrounding colors are a little blue here. If I zoom out and look at the other specular, you can see that that's quite kind of cyan and blue. So looking at the numbers in the info palette here, you can see indeed the blue is up. Here, let me rip this off and bring it over. The blue is up at 146, green is in the middle at 123, and red is at 110. So let's bring the red up a little bit. And so it's selecting that white point here on the red. And I can just use the keys on the keyboard to bring that toward a little bit more in line with the green channel. Okay? And then we'll go to the blue channel, and we want to bring that down a little bit. So I'll just use the down arrow to drag that down a point, or maybe even two. Yeah, so that's how your black and white color balance is done. You get those black and white points done, and then you start to look and see if there's any gray in the image that you can base any midtone color correction off of. With this one, I might just kind of darken it back down a little bit. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So that's just kind of color balance to get a neutralized image to work from. And everybody's going to have their own opinion about it, but setting the black and white points is a scientific thing that can give you clues to what might be off a little bit. Well, let's see. So now we want to start seeing if we can match this color. And I'll show you a couple of things to consider and maybe some adjustment layers that aren't commonly used, but we use a lot in printing and pre-press. It can help you achieve this printed 4-color offset printed look. So back here, let's make a new layer group and call it like Risograph match, something like that. Right off the bat, I can see the blacks in your match image, match files are really lifted. So I think that's probably a good place to start. A way to do that with curves is you take this black point and just kind of drag it up along the curve, and see how that you're going to lose all that lovely detail that you recovered. But to achieve this look how little detail there is in these shadows. There's almost nothing. So you do have to do this clipping maneuver, and you know, you might be able to get there with doing like a curve like this and kind of hold some of it, you know, hold some of that detail in the shadows. But the quick and easy way to clip it is just drag it in along that 45-degree angle. Similar thing though for the highlights is, and we'll keep an eye on the speculars here, but there's no real bright highlight here in either of these images. They're pretty, this has a little bit of white here on the edge, but the rest of it, like if we were to crop out this white edge, I think we'd see a little bit different histogram, but it's pretty smooth there in the highlights. So you might bring those down just to rein in the brightest highlights. Okay, so that's just overall tonality. Now I think you want to get these reds kind of lined in with these. And I would say like these reds have too much like blue or magenta in them, and these are a little too orange compared to here. So how do we kind of bring those red colors together? One useful, not often used adjustment layer is the selective color, and this allows you to do color adjustments within individual colors. So you can go, this is very often used in CMYK printing, like, oh, I need more shape in the reds. You might add black to give it more of shape. But here we're going to push, I think we'll push the yellows up a little bit in the reds, just to push that a little bit more toward orange. Magenta, you can bring that down maybe a little bit. Cyan is going to kind of correspond to the reds, and that's another way to give reds more shape in printing, but I might even drag that down. So yeah, maybe something like that for the reds for now. Now let's visit the blacks, and these, the darkest tones, they look a little bit warm to me. Let's get our info palette up here and have a look at the values. Okay, they're pretty neutral actually, 60, 61. So they're pretty neutral gray. I think the rest of the image is having an influence on my perception of that dark tone. But over here they almost look a little bluish or cyan, and that's pretty typical of printing, to have less red, more green and blue. So let's see if we can bring the cyan up in the blacks, and if that kind of gives us a little bit more. The opposite of the same move to increase the cyan is to decrease the magenta and the yellow. It's going to be the same kind of color move, but it'll increase the overall ink or decrease the overall ink. Yeah, something like that. It still looks a little yellow to me, so I'm going to drag that yellow down a little bit. Kind of try and make it cool. All right, let's kind of imagine the whites here. And again, you don't have many like neutral whites in this image, just the specular highlights, which you can't always trust those. But you do want them kind of dirtied up. Up here, they almost look a little yellow to me on this image. Let's see. Yeah, red and green are up and blue is down, so that's yellow in CMYK. And then here it's almost kind of pink. So red is up higher than magenta quite a bit. Yeah, comparatively, it's a little pink in the cement. That's a little tricky. Let's see what we can do here with the whites. So definitely in the more highlighted, we want more yellow in the highlights. And yeah, we might not see much of an effect here, but sometimes this absolute will move the endpoints, like we were doing with the curve. It'll have more of an effect. So we'll give that a try. Yeah, let's just go with that, like 10 yellow. Where I think we're going to see a lot of effect now is adjusting these neutrals. And kind of warm overall. This is pink here in the darker neutrals, and then again kind of yellow in the whites. So if we brought cyan down, that would kind of make it more red overall. Magenta might kind of fight the greens in your image. Maybe if we brought the blacks down, kind of washes things out. Let's revisit the blacks. As I click that absolute, I think it started to have too much effect. Maybe we need a little bit more cyan in there. Yeah. All right, so, you know, conventionally this would be a horrible thing to do to an image, but I understand you're going for this cool kind of retro look. Let's see, another way to adjust individual colors within colors is the hue saturation. And if you go into the channels, like we're going to need to work on these reds to kind of bring them together. These are still too purple compared to your image, and this is still too orange. So one way to work with those is you go into like the red channel here, and you click this eyedropper, and you see how, let me drag this over so we can have a view of it. You see how the slider down here slides around when you click and drag on the image, and that's selecting that region of that color. And this is probably more toward the magenta purple area of the red, and this is obviously more toward the orange. Let's work on these oranges, and you can hold down minus to reduce that area of the selection, and then plus to kind of get that area into that selection. And then let's maybe bring that maybe toward that color. We can bring this slider in a little bit to have less of an effect out there. Maybe something like that. Yeah, let's bring the saturation back a little bit. And you can have a second adjustment by if you go to the yellow, what's called the yellows right now. If you click on here, see how it changes to reds too. So you can have multiple adjustments in that similar color ranges. You're not locked into anything. So let's work on this. I'll just add a little bit to that selection. Drag it out here. Let's see if we can bring more yellow to this area. So kind of more like that. Yeah, that kind of brings them a little bit closer together, but I think overall we need to shift it more toward a deeper red. So we can make even a third adjustment and you know, select this area and this area, maybe even spread it out a little bit. And then we can adjust all of those reds at the same time and kind of bring those toward what we're seeing in the image. Yeah, maybe something like that. So those are, I'll put the properties right there. So those are a few strategies to start to get the look here in this color match. Let's see. You know, there are a couple other ones that you might find handy, like channel mixer, where you can mix colors from the different channels together. I don't really mess with that too much. You can always add another instance of selective color to do more work with the blacks, say. I don't know, maybe does it need to be more neutral, less neutral? Something like that, I don't know. reds. This might benefit from a little bit more black tone in there. And I wonder, push the yellows up just a hair and this up. Yeah, that starts to get that really blocked out kind of look that you're seeing here. Yeah, we can call that good. So another strategy I would do is I saw in your attempt file you were adding in this halftone pattern, and that's something that you're looking to do on the texture. In order to get that to be kind of accurate, you see it a little bit more in this image. It does look like they're halftone CMYK dots. So the way to get that in Photoshop is you need to convert it to CMYK. We only have RGB channels, and when you take it into CMYK, you'll have the 4 cyan, magenta, yellow, and black channel. And then it'll do the color halftone on all 4 colors, and you'll get something that's a little bit closer to this sort of look, you know. So the way to do that without having to flatten your work and lose it all is I'm just going to save this as a large document format file. And here's kind of a quick hack is select all and edit copy merged, and then make a new document, and that'll inherit the pixel dimensions. That's all I really wanted to do when I copied that to the clipboard, was to get these pixel dimensions. And let's go to CMYK color here and choose a color profile that's like for newsprint maybe. This just has the look and feel of like a newsprint, uncoated type CMYK. So let's see, here's like the snap. That typically has really lifted blacks. So that might be a good one to use. It doesn't really matter. All you really need is the separation of the 4 channels, but that might snap might be a good way to separate this that's similar to this image. So instead of pasting in those pixels we have on the clipboard, I'm just going to load it in as a linked smart object. So I can drag, at least in Mac, I can drag and I think can hold down Control and Option, and hit return, and see how it's linked here? It's a linked smart object. Let's get rid of that. And now that's in CMYK and a linked smart object, I can apply that color halftone filter. So filter, what is it, pixelate, color halftone, like 5 or 6, will give you that look. Now these are a little bit more smoothed out, obviously, so you might give it just like a little bit of a blur. And again, these are being applied as smart filters, so if you don't like that size of the halftone, you can go down. You can always adjust that or adjust the blur too, depending on what you want. So this is a method to work fairly resiliently with this. And now that you've got that halftone pattern you can go back to your linked smart object. Here, let's save this. Just call that CMYK. So now this smart object is linked. If you double click it, it's just going to say, hey, here I am right here. So now you can make further adjustments to this image and try and dial in that tonality. Maybe you think the blacks are too cyan, too much cyan in the blacks. You can go back here and reduce that a little bit in this file. And what else? Maybe the reds aren't, they're still a little too orange and we want them to be more, have more magenta in them to kind of redden them up even more. So maybe make a move like that. So when you save, it should automatically update over here in this file. See? So that's a way to view your image in CMYK color space, get that color halftone that you're after, but still be able to make adjustments in RGB, which is what you want to do, because what we're doing with this is trying to build a color lookup table or a method that you can just drag this to any other image and get the same effect, given that you've done this initial color balance. In theory, you can apply the same effect to, or the same adjustment layer group to everything else. You know, you're not using individual channels and specific selections. It's more resilient for a workflow. So let's say we're pretty happy with this. Well, I'm not actually happy. Let's make those neutrals a little bit more cyan. Yeah, or I don't know, maybe that. Go to relative for this adjustment. And back here, maybe we could. Yeah. More yellow in these? Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's helping a little bit. Okay, save your work here so you can actually see it displayed here. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit more along the lines of what we want. Again, you know, you have a totally different tonal distribution in this image. There's so many shadows compared to here, so it's tough to really get it dialed in, and you don't have any like neutral whites here. So, but we'll try it with one of the other images I saw on your Flickr. So I'll show you. I'll take this all the way through. Well, no, let's make this into a lookup table first. So let's make a LUT of just these layers. So what I'm going to do I haven't worked that much with LUTs, but this is the way they work. They'll take all the adjustment layers that you have and put them into their own color lookup. And that is basically an ICC profile, a color profile. So I'm just going to make like a new document, just a blank one, just for saving out this lookup table. I'm just going to drag this over here. And that's just so I don't have any other adjustments, or I'm not sure how the export's going to handle the smart filters and stuff. So to make a lookup table, you go to file export, color lookup. We'll call this keep your grid points. They say to keep your grid points like medium. If you go to maximum, it can get really slow. And for most applications, for most instances, like medium is fine. Cube is the one to select for Photoshop to use really easily. So let's export that. I made a folder here to kind of test it out. So let's just save it there. And then let's try out that lookup table on a different image. So yeah, I'll keep that open. Let's go to one of the other ones you had. Was it this one? Yeah. So we'll open this one up. I'll keep the Pro Photo profile. We'll do that color balance thing again. So yeah, let me get rid of that other stuff. So Command J and go into the Adobe Camera Raw filter. Might want to bring up the exposure here. The saturation comes down. A little bit of haze. Add up a bit more. Let's bring down the highlights. All right. Here you have something to look at for the neutrals. It'll give you your RGB values right here. You can see the red it's a little bit warm. Trying to look at a spot that's not dirty, because that dirt is going to be kind of red. Yeah, that almost actually looks pretty neutral here. Not too bad. Okay, we'll call that good. I think I've got enough shadow detail. I don't need to do the... Oh, you know what? I forgot to make that a smart object. Let's be good. Convert that to a smart object. And then if you do that again, you can say previous conversion. And that's the same thing we just committed to. Then we can do that color curve that we did. Just for a little bit more refinement. Set the black point. How did that turn out? Kind of took some yellow out of that, the shadows. And just kind of keeping an eye on this white towel. It does look fairly well balanced. Maybe just a hair on the blue side. So let's warm that up by bringing the blues down. Overall, it seems a little bit blue. yeah, something like that. So I went from here to there. Nice to have a little bit more less shadow in the subject's face, because that's where people are always going to look. And it's got a little bit more like contrast in there. All right, so let's try our lookup table and see what happens. It's gonna be interesting. So to load that lookup table, you go here and color lookup. Load 3D LUT here. Just click that and browse out to wherever you had saved it. There it is. And there's our version. So you might be like, oh, that's a little disappointing. We could do the similar thing here where we, let's see, we could, oh, not that. We could select all, oops, sorry. Select all, copy merged, new document, CMYK, we're on Snap, right? Yeah. Paste it in there. I'm going to make this a smart object. And do the pixelate color halftone. And apply a blur of some sort. So yeah, that is way different than what we'd wanted, and it's going to take some work to dial in an option. You're going to have to work with several different images and keep refining this. So the way I would go about that is turn off this color lookup and bring over your match. So you'll notice that, oops, bring this over here. Oh, not to the CMYK. That's not going to work. Bring it over to did I close that? Closed it. There she is. Turn off that color lookup. Bring these layers over to the RGB version. And then you should have, these should match exactly. But you can do more work in here to kind of give it that same tonality. You might, overall, you might just kind of think to take some of the color out. It's still ruddy, I would say, in the neutrals. So give that a little bit more cyan in the neutrals. And recover a little bit in the darker tones. Oh, I didn't actually embed this, did I? So save that as that. Drag that over. Return. And then I can just drag these smart filters from that to there. Delete that. Okay, now these two are linked. What more could we do to this to get it to look like that. So yeah, if you keep kind of working with this iteratively and refining your risograph match layer group here, and when you get a good result for each image, you know, just keep working on it and refining it. Or export it out as a new version. Eventually, I would imagine after about 10 or 12 images of different varieties and different lighting conditions and subjects, you could get something that's going to give you that type of look for everything. But I hope those are some good strategies for a couple different options of how you might work with this. I should call this 3. Now we can load that one in that we just made. And see how different it is. You know, see, that didn't change that much, but we did make some pretty big changes to this file. So color is funny that way. You're going to need a larger sample group with different images to refine it toward giving it this overall tone. So now you probably want to share this on the internet. You're not going to go and print this out. So to get that this same look, you could take this back into, I would say, take this back into sRGB for web. But if you convert this back to sRGB, it's going to affect this color halftone that you had done. A couple different options for that is you could you know, merge visible, Command Option Shift E, and then this this color halftone and stuff is baked in. Or you could do yet another new document, and then like your final your final version that's in sRGB. And then you take your CMYK and embed that as a linked smart object. And then save this out. You can size it and scale it or whatever. So yeah, now you have linked smart objects linked to other linked smart objects and other smart objects. So one thing to maybe keep in mind, let me see if I can find this, this base image here. There it is. Like if you make an adjustment here, I'll just make some kind of drastic adjustment, I guess. It's going to update here, but did it update in our final? It doesn't look like it. So what you'll need to do is say update all modified content. Well, you probably need to save this and then it would update. But you might need to update all modified content here as well. So that's a way to work non-destructively and go from start to finish all the way through, and you haven't locked yourself in or backed yourself into any corner, you haven't applied any filters. So it might be a good strategy to develop a lookup and apply filters, and you could work out a way to put all these settings into a lookup table and or an action. So I hope that helps, and I didn't ramble on too long and confuse you with stuff, but a lot of people don't know about this initial kind of color neutralization step that you need to do before you can apply the same look to all images. They need to start off from a similar point with similar black and white points, fairly neutralized midtones or neutral colors. So I hope that helps, and good luck with stuff. Take care.